Hello there, UW Math fans. I have this idea to do review sessions for students on Zoom just to connect more with former students. But this is sort of the beginning of me thinking about this idea. Now, the big problem is I'm only one person. And the department, university, won't pay me to do review sessions, which is part of why I made this YouTube channel, just to help students. I have a lot of stuff. I have a lot of students that want to work with me or get help from me, and I'm just one person. And so I've been doing this already for some courses, but I want to be a little more formal here. It would be very helpful to me if you could, like, subscribe, and then in the comments, give me some feedback on how this would work. In particular, what would be helpful in the chat, and I'm asking students already, it'd be good to know when your exams are. I'll research a little bit to try to figure out, but mostly I'm thinking about these courses. I probably will focus a little bit more on Math 126 immediately because I know a lot of those students because I taught them in Math 125 last term. But I was just thinking about how to help you, because we want to help you. I'm trying to figure out what would resonate with students. What I'm going to do in this video is I'm going to review for exam one for all of these courses. Now, some students might say, why are you skipping some of the other courses? These are courses I have taught regularly in the last 10 years, so I have exams to work from. I feel funny doing an exam review using a different instructor's material, so I'm just going to use my own, and that restricts me a little bit. Okay, so the first thing I wanted to say was general tips. And I think this goes for all of these courses. This is stuff I've been saying for years. Any studying tips is somewhat personal. I feel like as a student at the University of Washington or in college, a big part of what you're doing, and I'll explain this stuff over here in just a second, but a big part of what you're doing is learning when you know something. And actually, for me personally, I don't feel like I figured that out until graduate school. So you have some time to figure it out, but if you're a freshman in college, you might not know yet that when you know something. Because I got to a point where I could study a topic and be like, I know every question, I know it inside and out. And I feel like when you're 16, 17, 18, 19, you're still figuring that out. I'm still figuring out about some things. But at this point, I remember when I was younger, I would think I knew, and then I'd go into the test and be surprised. So that's what we're trying to deal with, is that surprise element. But I'll tell you some of the things I did to get over that hump. So number one, just from witnessing students, is how you approach homework. With this WebAssign way of doing things, there's some problems with that. Because what I find is a couple things. Some students don't write things down like they would on a test. And so then the test is kind of a shock because you haven't written things down. The other thing is a test, you only get one correct submission. And what I find is happening is some students will do they'll try one submission, they'll think they're right, and then it's not right. And then they just start randomly changing things. Change this number, change this variable, hoping that it'll work. And that is not good. Not good because you're trying to prepare for the exam. And so I would go back each week. I would have whatever it is, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever you got, the few minutes before or after class. I would open up the last couple homework assignments and just scroll through them and be like, okay, which ones tricked me? And have a little notebook or journal where you keep track of this question tricked me, this question tricked me, all the rest I felt good about. Or here's how I started those. 5 minutes a week. And included in that, you could pull up an old exam and be like, okay, I can do that question now. You need to start connecting the pieces. A lot of students are just kind of plowing through the homework. I know it's a lot of work on some of these courses, but even if you don't finish the homework, let's say you didn't quite get it done, there still needs to be this 5-minute moment where you look back through it. Okay. Then I would suggest you look at old exams, and that's what I'm going to focus on in the rest of this video. There's two ways to use old exam archives, in my opinion. There's probably others as well. But one is you could take a tour of exams. You can do that very fast, like in 5 or 10 minutes. And I would encourage you to regularly do that. But definitely about a week before the test, I would get a journal out. I would open up like 5 old exams, and I would try to go through 5 exams in 5 minutes. If you think about that, you're not going to be able to work through them. You're just going to be able to be like, what's the topic? How would I start? What's the topic? And you can put that on a little journal. And at the end, you could look and be like, okay, I knew how to start quite a few of them. Or I kept getting stuck on this question. I'm surprised not very many people do that. It requires so little time. And if you can do it a week before your test, you will suddenly get a lot of ideas in your head of the things you need to know. And so you really need to look at old tests. I would think that's a pretty general thing, just to sort of, and you can also do it with the homework, but I'm just adding this layer. And then you should work through some exams in detail. And what I'm worried about, sometimes students will come to me and they'll be like, I worked through an old test, I got to question 2, and I spent 3 hours studying it. And I'm still confused. And I'm angry. And to me, that's not effective studying. Because you wasted 3 exams, you feel worse than you did before, you didn't learn anything, and you'd see anything else. It's ineffective studying. It's determination. I like the students determined. I've had students message me and they said, I spent 14 hours studying and I did terrible on the test. And then you go open their test and they didn't know how to start most of the questions. So what's going on there? What was happening during those 14 hours? And that's the part I want to talk about. And that's what I'm trying to show you is, I think a few minutes just touring an old exam and writing down the first step, you're going to do really well. And the reason you want to do it a week before the exam, when I was a student, I would try to trick myself. I would say the exam is tomorrow. It's tomorrow, it's tomorrow, it's tomorrow. And then I would study forever. This is in grad school. I would go sit at Starbucks or whatever coffee shop, and I would study for like 6 hours. I was insane then. I was really into my topic, but I wanted to know it. And then I'd wake up the next day and I'd be like, oh, the exam's not today. I really tried to mentally trick myself because I thought, I'm going to cram, but it's nice if I can do that a week ahead of time. Okay, then you spend that week clarifying your questions. You go to the review sessions. The instructor tells you about things, and I can't tell you how much that helped me because I'd be like, oh yeah, I looked at those questions. The review session would just fill in the holes, and then I would ace. I hardly would study after that, is the truth. If you're really worried, you could look again about 2 days before the exam. But what I liked about this is it's like 1 day of cramming. It's just a week earlier. During the test, this is more of what I've observed other students do. You got to manage your time. I've seen students like get to page 2 and they spend 30 minutes and then they're mad at me later. They're like, I didn't get to the last few pages. It's not fair, whatever. That's part of the test. And so you got to manage that time. As you're studying, you could set a little timer and be like, okay, at 10 minutes, I'm going to move on. Make sure I get some things down. And some of that goes together with the fact that you should be touring old exams. You should leave nothing blank. Even if you're confused, you could write down some words. You could solve something similar. If you can't solve something, make up a number. Tell the grader you made up a number. Fight for your credit. Treat these questions like essay questions. Okay? Write everything you know, and then check anything you check. If you solve an equation and it takes 3 steps, and you get a number, why not just plug that number 3 steps earlier and know that it's right? I have a lot of students that say, oh, I do bad math because I make lots of small little math mistakes. But I would say over 50% of them are things you could have checked in like 3 seconds. So if you can build that in, that'll go better. So I'll finish this with a couple things. So as you tour an exam and you find that you're stuck on something, that's when you can use my materials. I have spent 20 years doing this. Nobody paid me for it. I feel like I don't know why I did it. I know why I did it. I did it because I wanted students to do well. I feel guilty when students do poorly. Sometimes students get mad at me because I posted a lot of stuff. I'm sorry. Sometimes they'll be like, well, what am I supposed to look at? I'm like, I didn't make it to make you mad at me. Okay, so anyways, when you find you're struggling, you can go here and find a review sheet. You can find a summary sheet. I have it for all of those courses in a lot of detail. So anyways, and I'm one of the most inexpensive teachers on campus. They can pay me less. Go tell someone to pay me more. Okay. Anyways, the other piece of this I want to talk about is this peeking through an old exam. So let's take a little tour. All right. So I have a bunch of old exams here. I got my journal open. And what I would like people to tell me is which courses maybe you'd like me to study more. Math 120, it's been a number of years since I've taught it. I hope to teach it again next year. But if I was a student and I was studying for Math 120, I would be making a little journal I would write down maybe the exam, 2009 exam. That might not even be in the archive. And I would write question 1. Oh, it's about lines in circles. Do I know how to find their intersection? Would I know step 1? Give the equation of the line. I would have a plan of what to do when I saw such a question. Question 2. Uniform linear motion. Would I know that step 1 is to play this game? A, B, and your instructor might write it a little differently. I would be trying to find these 4 numbers, A, B, C, and D. Okay. So this is what I mean by doing quickly, just like this is just getting things downloaded in your head. Oh, we have a parabola question. Do I know how to find the vertex? And this helps because I find students see a lot of words and they just don't read and they're like, I don't know what to do. Oh, do I know functional notation? That's very important if you're going into pre-calculus. I mean, you're going to calculus 1. Then we have this area question and multi-part function question. Do we know how to think about those? And that's part of what this course does, is prepares you for this idea. In calculus, you're often thinking about multi-part functions, or you have to think about how a function changes, or you have to think about the area from the left. That's very important in integral calculus when you get to Math 125. So a lot of this is just getting you ready for this idea of using a variable and finding a pattern and labeling. Like, how can you label that? Can you find the equation for this line? So I would find the equations. So when you're doing this sort of studying, you're trying to make some notes. Now, if I was just doing that class, I would spend a few more moments on each one and like write down the first step. But I'm trying to make this video a little shorter. I would be very happy to follow up with going through some of these exams in detail. Let me know in the comments if there's a particular old exam that I wrote that you would like me to work through. So put it in the comments. I'd like, it would be nice if I saw this old exam. Let's fill up the comments. I'd like to see where the interest lies the most. And then I'll go through that. Okay? And then you could watch the video and pause and see more details. This is a new thing I've been doing for several classes. For 125 and 126, I already have a lot of exams up. Okay, so 124. Let's be a 124 students. This was 120. You can see exam 1's was line. And already, even just writing this little thing, I have an idea of what the exam will be. And if you tour a second exam, then you get an even better idea. And if you tour a third exam, you can see where a few minutes and you know what's on the test. Not precisely, but you know the idea. It sort of reinforces what you saw in the homework. Okay, so 124. What do we got? Limits. Do you know how to handle finite limits? Do you know how to handle infinite limits? There's very different strategies for those two. I'd be happy to review those. It's a fairly routine thing. On my webpage, I have a step-by-step of what to do in every situation. This shouldn't scare us. No matter how messy it is, we have a routine. Even in this one, this was directly from the homework. I know that's directly on a Math 124 homework question. Then we have derivatives. Do we know our derivative rules? So if you wanted to do well, you'd want to know your limits well, and you'd want to know your derivatives well. Now, is my exam the same as every other instructor? No, you should look at several exams. We have another derivative question, but you had to know slopes of tangents. Okay, those are fairly quick. Then we have a graphical question. The graphical question's about understanding what these things mean. What can we say about when f prime is 0? And these are nice because you can kind of quickly think, when is the slope 0? And the slope is 0 there and everywhere along here. You do have to read something like this carefully. Here you have this function. What are the places where it's not differentiable, where slope doesn't make sense? This is something that I could handle quickly in a video. Anyways, that's for another piece. So that was more graphical, conceptual understanding. I know those questions can scare people. In general, I like to tell students that think of what happens is a student sees a graph and they give up. And that's a terrible strategy because really those 4 questions are likely independent and your understanding of one might not have anything to do with the other. So don't give up. This is a good example of don't leave anything blank. But now you would know that's something to prepare for. Okay, so then we have a multi-part function. It looks scary, but it's not. It needs to be continuous everywhere. So often this is about comparing what's happening from the left and the right. And so at some point in this problem, we're going to be plugging 1 into both of these, and we want them to be the same. So if I plug 1 into the first one and I plug 1 into the second one, I want those to be the same. So I have one fact. In general, in problems like this, you're trying to collect facts. What happens if you plug in 3 to both of these? Well, this one's going to require a limit. The limit as x approaches 3 from the right of x squared minus 9 over x minus 3. And you should know the strategy when you get this indeterminate form. It's just more limits. The strategy is to simplify factor. For finite limits, that's a strategy. So anyways, then you would be able to plug in, you would get that value, and you'd also plug in 3 here. So it looks scary, but it's actually not. Okay, so you have 2 equations, 2 unknowns, done. If someone prepares, they would know that. They would know about plugging in, thinking about limits. So this is a continuity question. So if you looked even at a couple of exams, that problem wouldn't scare you as much. Oh, then we have a velocity, a difference quotient. So velocity, acceleration, difference quotient. And you would ask yourself, do any of those do I not know how to start immediately? Equation of a tangent line, equation of a tangent line. So it ends with equation of the tangent line. If somebody would like me to work through that exam, tell me in the comments. I would like to start tailoring, because I'm one person, I want to tailor what I do to what is most helpful. And my priority first is to my current class, which is Math 112, but I have a lot of stuff for these other courses. I want to help you, and I want to start to think about what I can start making in the years ahead that would help students do better in these courses. I think people think that we're against them or we don't care. Maybe that's true of some of the faculty, but it's not true of me. I want you all to do well in this course. I hope you all ace the course. And then I can go to the department and say, I'm done with this curve stuff. We are doing great. Let's pass everybody. Okay, give me that chance. Okay, so let's keep going. Math 125. Math 125, my exams, sometimes my exams are a little formulaic, but it's all the same topics, even if you're taking from other instructors. So it looks like we need to understand how to integrate. Well, that's the story for all. But here it's going to be integration that just involves simplification and substitution. Substitution, substitution. So the first exam for Math 125, all you need to know is simplifying and substitution. That can be tough, but honestly, this should not scare you. You should just immediately be saying u equals something, almost anything. X cubed makes the most sense because it's on the inside. You do 3x squared, and you plug everything in, and you simplify, and that's a story for another day. I'm very happy to do some of those. I have already posted a ton of videos on this. And then you reevaluate. And a lot of the challenges students face is just the ability to look at a function in more than one way. And realize, okay, it's still a huge mess. And whenever it's still a huge mess, there's probably a substitution you can do. But some students go, we have to do a substitution twice? My brain's going to explode. You can handle it. I know you can handle it. And then suddenly, the problem cleans up dramatically. So I showed a few more steps there just because this course, is a little fresher in my mind. But the point I wanted to make was, if you study old exams, you'll have done this a bunch of times. So you'll be like, okay, I need to know how to simplify the first one, roots, everything, or whatever. And you'll have done a lot of this in the homework. I need to do substitution. Okay. So then you get to the second page on my test, and we have substitution. We have an area. So we'll just write area. Students that know what they're doing will have done lots of this in the homework. And so that shouldn't surprise us. We should know that we need to find an intersection. If there are intersections, we need to draw a rough picture. That sometimes scares students. Not quite sure why, because it's a line and a parabola, but there's this total uneasiness about graphing. If you have no idea how to graph anything, you are going to have a little bit of trouble in these courses, but you also have a technique that always works, which is you can plug in points. When you plug in 0, you get a 0. When you plug in a 3, you get a 1. And also, if you're finding the intersection, you substitute. And so if I was finding the intersection, I'd rewrite this as y squared is x, and then you combine these two things. Now, that's the other issue I've seen is some students don't understand the idea of combining. They just set things equal. So these are the little things that you should be kind of ironing out while you're doing the homework. That's why it's so important to do the homework. So they intersect at 0 and when y is 3. But when y is 3, x is 9. And I have a line. Okay, that's something you desperately want to be practicing when you're doing the homework. Then it's just the integral of top minus bottom. So that should become a routine problem because you'll have done so much of it in the homework. Okay, we have more of a theory page here. And what I mean by that is we have definition of the derivative. I can go through and do that. I have videos where I've talked about that. You have to be able to decipher this based off of the fact that delta x is b minus a over n and xi. And this was just to get it so that our eyeballs don't explode when we look at the definition of the derivative. It's very short to do such a problem. So this is one of these things that looks bad, but if you prepare, it's not bad. And then you say, what's a? Well, it looks like a is 1. If a is 1, then what's b? B is 4. So it's the integral from 1 to 4. And then what's the function? Well, this is xi, so it's x to the third dx. I'd be happy to do a video on this one. I probably already have this somewhere. But you need to let me know in the comments if you want to see something like that. We have fundamental theorem of calculus, part 1. Equation of the tangent line. Sometimes students get confused on that because they've forgotten this course, where they did that many times. And they're like, that was unfair. That's from a previous course. I don't know about that. I think equation for a tangent line is something you shouldn't have forgotten. Then we have this idea of antiderivatives. So we have antiderivatives and constants of integration. So constants. Then we have this idea of total change. You should immediately know what to do here. You'll have done this several times in your homework. Any student that doesn't immediately write this first doesn't know what they're doing. That is the very first step in this problem. Once you solve that, then you break it up. Happy to make a video about that. I got a bunch of stuff I can say. Those questions should be routine. We should not have to even think if we're thinking something's wrong. And I would tell you that about 80% of my students get that message, and then 20% I open their exam and there's stuff going all over the place. Those are the ones that are mad at me later, but that's the thing you can prepare for. So then we have volume of revolution. Some quarters that's on the first test, some quarters it's not. And most often it's just about labeling. Can you label this length and this length? And I find some students can't. That's more of a geometry skill, but it's something I'd be happy to review. Let me know in the comments. All right, let's keep going. Math 126, let's take a look at that. And again, you wouldn't be doing this. You'd be doing this for just one course. I'm just reviewing everything that I have exams for. So here we go. 126, what do I got? It looks like we're dealing with lines in planes in vectors. And if I'm studying, I would write, what's the first step here? And Math 126 students should know what a line looks like. We shouldn't have to even think. And we should know the two things we're trying to find are a point and a direction vector. And once we find those 6 numbers, we will be done. You need to have that strategy before you step into the test. And then you just need to find 2 points. Now, my opinion on these questions, I have kind of a different opinion than some, is I just find 2 points on the intersection. And once I have those 2 points, we're done. Some people do other stuff. Okay, there's a vector question. There's a projection question. Sometimes projections really bother students, but there's a formula that's going to be pretty quick. Question 2, so those wouldn't scare me. Question 2 is about planes. So I guess question 1 was about lines. Find the distance between 2 things. Oh, that's from the homework. So if you were studying, you'd be like, oh no, that homework question from 12.1 and 12 6 has reappeared. So I'd go back and look at it. This is a vector problem. If you're doing a vector problem and you're using facts, the two facts I would have on my note sheet are this fact, the dot product fact, and the cross product fact. And I'd be happy to do a review on those. It's in my review sheets. Okay, so then we have a question about curves. That's chapter 13. Finding the tangent line for a curve. All of that stuff we do a lot of. The angle of intersection. The moment we see angle of intersection, we should be thinking about the dot product fact. I call this a 10-star fact when I teach that course. And you're trying to find theta, but it requires you understand the two vectors you're trying to find. That's in the homework. A lot of students miss that. Be happy to do that in a video. I'm sure I already have one posted about it. Okay, so then we have a question about curves and surfaces of motion. We have a question about curvature. We have a question about arc length. That's more on curves. A lot of stuff in chapter 13 is just straight computational, and so you would just need to know those computations. Okay, there's exam 1 for Math 126. So you can see it's about lines, planes, vectors, and curves. Already we have that figured out, and that's pretty darn accurate. So I always have students say what'll be on there, but if you look at a few old exams, you'll know immediately what's on there. Then your job is to fill in those details and find where the questions are. Let's keep going. Math 207 I haven't taught quite as much, and it's changed a bit in the last few years, but let's take a peek anyways. Okay, so Math 207, the last time I taught it, looks like we have a separable equation. And then we have a linear equation. Those are the two solving techniques. If you need a review on those, I have a review sheet that talks about those two solving techniques with lots of examples. By the time you get to the exam, you will have done many of those. What's this one? Oh, this is I'm giving you the form of an answer, find the constants. You do some of that in the beginning of Math 207. And then we have an equilibrium solution. So this is like a plug in a solution, and then equilibrium analysis. So if you're someone that was preparing, you would hammer those things down. Those are actually fairly routine things to do. Classifying them as stable, semi-stable, unstable. Okay, so then we have an applied problem. And this is one of the hard parts. Sometimes for students in Math 207 is there's applied problems. But the truth is there's only a handful of them in the homework, so you would master those. I have a bunch of review sheets on that, and then you solve. Here it's linear, so it's solving another linear equation. Euler's method, so we have an approximation. That's really fast to do. Easy to prepare for, in my opinion. We have another application problem. And we have, last time I taught this, I had a page of just application setup questions. That's it. So you can see it's about solving first order equations, a little bit about plugging in an equilibrium, and then a couple applied problems and one small approximation problem. Just by looking at a couple of the exams, we already kind of have an idea of what's going to be on there, but then you would start worrying about filling in details. Math 224. This is our Calculus 4 class. We call it multivariable calculus. Last time I taught it, it was called 324, but they've changed the numbering system a little bit. So what do we have here? 224. Looks like double integrals. That's where we start that course. So do we remember how to deal with double integrals? And this is really about being able to draw the picture that goes with this region. And I'd be happy to review that. I do that in 126. That's not bad. Then we have a triple integral. That's about describing some sort of solid. I talk about this quite a bit in the class. I have review sheets. I have a step-by-step of how to do it. It's something you can prepare for. I'm happy to do something about that. Find the volume in the first quadrant. It's cylindrical coordinates. So this is about a particular technique. It's basically polar coordinates, so some of what you're doing in 126 will be similar later. Then we have a question about spherical coordinates. And then we have a question about the Jacobian. Now, I don't know if that's at the beginning of 224 anymore, so you would have to check that against your homework. And then we have a transformation. So I'll just Jacobian describing regions. This is a continuation of some of the themes from earlier courses. Okay, so that's it. And that video is probably long. I haven't checked the time yet. But I just reviewed 120, 124, 125, 126, 207, 224. Imagine if you're taking just one of those courses. You could do many exams in a short amount of time. And then you could know what your questions are. And you could go look at those questions. And if you did that a week before the test, just think about how you've already downloaded the challenges into your head. All right, I hope you find that interesting. I hope you find this helpful. And I really hope that in the comments, you tell me which course you're in and which course you want to review for. It might even help if you told me what date your exam is. And I'm going to start to think about how I could do some short Zoom reviews to meet with some of you. So I would like everyone to be doing better in these courses, and I'd like everyone to realize that the teaching faculty in our department want you to do well. We're trying lots of different things. Work with us. All right.